The Christmas story tells us that God is with us. We see the angels sing, the shepherds worship, the wise men come and they bow and they bring their gifts. A child is born and is wrapped in promise. And then almost immediately, God tells them to run for their life. There's no explanation, there's no countdown, there's no transition period. As a matter of fact, let's go to the text. The text literally says it this way. In Matthew chapter 2, verse 13 through 15, it says, "Now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, 'Rise, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt and remain there until I tell you. For Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him.' And he arose and took the child and his mother by night and departed to Egypt and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet, 'Out of Egypt I called my son.'" I mean, look at this. There's no explanation. There's no countdown. There's no transition period. Just this: get up, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. I want that to sit for a second. Let that sit for a second, because that's not the ending that we expect in the Christmas story. That's not how we would write it. That's not the direction that we would choose, and that does not feel like what we would call progress. It feels like a contradiction. We expect that when God says that God is with us, we want that to mean stability. We want it to mean momentum. We want it to mean clarity. We want it to mean forward movement. But Scripture gives us something completely different. God with us leads them into exile, leads them into danger. Right after the miracle, right after the worship, right after the confirmation. And if we're honest, this hits way too close to home. Some of you are stepping out into a year that feels just like this. You heard from God, you obeyed, you trusted, you worshiped. And instead of things opening up, they fell apart. Instead of momentum, what you're experiencing is disruption. And the quiet question that you don't say out loud is, did I miss God? Or is God really with me? And before we can measure what Egypt represents, we have to talk about measurement itself. We have to talk about measurement itself. How do you measure things? Before we talk about Egypt, before we talk about exile, before we interpret what the disruption is, we need to talk about how we measure life. Because this tape measure I'm holding here isn't good or bad. It's just a tool. All it is a tool. It measures. That's all it measures. But depending on which direction it is used, the same tape measure can either help me build something or convince me that everything in my life is going wrong. Okay? So look at it this way, right? This is how most of us measure our life. We measure our life forward, okay? Forward. Like we measure it going forward, away from where we are right now to where we want to be. And so we start asking ourselves, how far do I still have to go? How much hasn't happened yet? Where do I need to be by now in my life? I'm hitting 30, I'm hitting 40, I'm hitting 50, whatever age you are, and you're measuring yourself based on some ideal that someone else made up. They didn't come by prophetic declaration. It may have come from social media, it may have come from parental pressure, it might have come from peer pressure, whatever it is. You're measuring your life towards what hasn't happened yet. And so what happens is that we call that type of measurement, we call that the gap. How far you still need to go. How much hasn't happened yet. Where you thought you should be by now. The gap is always measuring ahead. And when disruption hits you while you're measuring like this, everything in your life is going to feel wrong, because the gap is going to assume that delays are denials. Detours mean disobedience. Disruption means failure. So when God says, go to Egypt, the gap mentality is going to say, this is not progress. This is not progress. But there's another way of measuring things. There's another way to measure. If you measure backwards, you start to realize how far God has brought you, what he's already protected you from, what he has already been faithful through. And this is what we call the gain. How much God has done. You're looking backwards, you're saying, oh my God, look where we've come. Look how far we've come by faith. See, the thing is that the gain doesn't deny difficulty. It just refuses to forget grace. And when disruption comes, the gain does not panic. Because the gain knows God has already proven himself. God has already proven himself. If you measure from that perspective, all you're measuring is all the points where God showed himself to be faithful. And here's the truth that holds this entire series, this entire conversation we've been having together. The gap measures how far you still have to go, and the gain measures how far God has already gone for you, how far he's gone before you, how far he's brought you from. And here's the key. Egypt doesn't change. What changes is how you measure the Egypt of your life. If you measure Egypt with the tape pointed forward, you'll call it regression. If you measure Egypt with the tape pointed backwards, you'll recognize that Egypt was God's protection. Same road, same command, same God, just a different ruler. So the text continues. It says, when they had gone out, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. And this is where the Christmas story keeps going. And this is part that we oftentimes skip in the Christmas story, the aftermath of the Christmas story, if you will, because it doesn't fit the version of blessing that we prefer. We all have our preferential blessing, our preferential grace that we expect from God. But when God moves a different way, it disrupts us. It discombobulates us. We start wondering, where is God? And is God really in this thing that I am pursuing? Did I really hear God correctly? And so Egypt will feel like a problem, because Egypt is not neutral ground. Okay, Egypt was pagan. Egypt was foreign. Egypt was unsafe. It was the place where the Israelites had once escaped from slavery, from brutal slavery. So Egypt, in this context, feels like going backwards. It contradicts the testimony of the shepherds. It contradicts the gifts that the wise men brought. It contradicts the declaration of the angels. It contradicts the promise of Emmanuel, God with us, because now God is in exile. At least if you're measuring forward. And here's something we must say very, very clearly. Egypt was not the gap. Why? Because Joseph was not running in fear. Joseph was running in obedience. Joseph was running in obedience. And the gap is when you're moving in the gap, you move from a perspective of anxiety-driven striving, self-inflicted pressure, control that's disguised as wisdom. But Egypt was God-initiated. It was spirit-directed. It was protective. Completely part of God's plan. And so the gap is the pressure that we create, and Egypt was the protection that God was providing for Joseph, Mary, and baby Jesus. God was not undoing gain. God was not reversing his promise. He was preserving his promise. Herod was still measuring forward, still grasping for control, and still reacting with violence. So God says, I will protect the gain by relocating it. Sometimes God does not elevate you. Sometimes God relocates you. Sometimes God does not just promote you, but he moves you towards the fulfillment of his plan. So Let's look at the gifts. The wise men had brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And we oftentimes like to spiritualize what those things mean. But I want to say this. I want to say that even though we can find spiritual meaning in the gold, the frankincense, and the myrrh, but they're also very, very practical, because exile costs money. And so those gifts that were given were not just for celebration, but they were also provision for survival. What looked like provision for promise became provision for escape. Sometimes God funds a future that you don't quite understand yet. And here's the theological hinge of this entire message. God does not stop being Emmanuel because you're in Egypt. He doesn't say, I'll meet you back here when you come back to Bethlehem. I'll be back here when you're in Nazareth. No, God with us, Emmanuel, means when you go to Egypt, when I send you to Egypt, I am with you in Egypt as well. Egypt is not absence. Egypt became God's accompaniment. God with us doesn't mean God keeps us comfortable. It means that God refuses to abandon us. And so exile is formation, not failure. Let me say that one more time. Exile is formation, not failure. Because Matthew later tells us in the passage, it says, this was to fulfill, out of Egypt I called my son. Egypt was not the destination, it was part of the process. And Jesus' earliest years were not shaped in prominence, but it was shaped in obscurity, not in applause, not in dependence. God used exile to form what prominence would destroy. And so as we step into this new year, some of you are going to be facing disruption. As a matter of fact, the entire world, the entire planet is going to experience disruption at a level that's never been seen before in human history. As we step into this year, plans will change. Doors will close. You'll be relocated. You'll experience loss. You'll experience delay. And the temptation will be, I must have measured wrong. But Scripture offers another possibility. And here's what Scripture offers. Sometimes the gain requires relocation and not acceleration. So what if this disruption that you may be facing isn't punishment? What if this detour is not a denial? What if exile does not mean abandonment? What if God isn't behind? What if God isn't behind, but already ahead of you in Egypt? Oh my God. Christmas taught us God is with us. Egypt teaches us God stays with us. In blessing, in disruption, in uncertainty, in exile, in a lack of clarity, God stays with us. And so I want you to embrace these things, embrace it, and say to God, I will trust you in disruption. I will trust you in transition. I'll trust you even in exile. Why? Because God is with us. So here's the truth. No more measuring. The truth that we get to carry into the new year is the same God who met us in the manger will walk with us into exile, and he will not leave us there. That the disruption that you may face is part of God's process. That God works even when he's not elevating or promoting you, but he's moving and relocating you. God stays with you. My prayer for you is that you'll embrace all the commands. If God says run, don't run in anxiety or fear. Run in obedience. That this is part of the fulfillment of what God has planned and prepared for you. That if you are facing an Egypt in your future, He's already there, and he will meet you there. He'll never leave you or forsake you. He's for you. So who can stand against you? God bless you. We'll see you guys next week. Next week, we will have a very, very special experience that I want to invite all of you to, as we have some very, very special announcements concerning the future direction of our church as we step into 2026. I love you all. Have a good day.